or do you want to wait for a few?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. The date is May 15th, 2025. The time is 7:03 p.m. This is a meeting of the Mad River Valley Planning District Steering Committee. The first item on the agenda is the call to order. So we are calling the meeting to order. The second item on the agenda is, are there any adjustments to the agenda? Hearing none, we will move on to the third item, public comment. Are there any members of the public here who would like to comment? There are not. Therefore, we'll move on to item 4, acceptance of the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes of April 17th, 2025?
Make that motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Do people need a minute to read the minutes?
I'll second it.
Oh, second. Okay. We have a motion, a second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? Any rejections? Hearing none, we'll move on to the fifth item, the staff report.
And Dan, just for the record, so that was a motion by Dave Babbitt-Klein and second by Jonathan Erskine.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Motion by Dave Babbitt-Klein and a second by Jonathan Erskine. Thank you for clarifying. Then the fifth item, we'll move to the fifth item on the agenda, which is the staff report. Joshua, please.
All right, so Sam and I are gonna tag team here. I'll start and then he'll jump in. A handful of things. A lot going on. Currently, start with the Waitsfield Community Wastewater Project, which was a discussion we were having before, just briefly before the meeting started. So continuing the coordination work, there's a project update on the agenda for the upcoming Waitsfield Select Board meeting, which is on the 19th, so on Monday. There's a lot going on with project design. The draft 60% design drawings were submitted, were completed today, and they've been sent along to the some of the permitting authorities from Vermont to DEC to VTrans to get their concurrence. And it incorporates a variety of dialogue that's happened with a variety of different parties over the last couple of months. So this is a really exciting moment in time, anticipating about a month's review for those parties, and then that'll be moved back into the project. We're also coordinating at this time the engineering consultants of both this project and the Vermont 100 active transportation corridor scoping study about the possible co-location for a portion of the path, specifically between the Laurel Swim Hole and bridge to Kingsbury Road, where the mud site is. And there's a lot of pieces to that puzzle for that to work, and we're currently trying to scope all of that out. A lot of time recently has been focused on funding. As I mentioned at our last time we met, we had just submitted an application to the Vermont Community Development Program that was submitted on the 9th of April. There's a Community Development Board meeting on the 8th of June, and that's where we anticipate a final decision. That's $1 million for project construction. And then the day after I met with you all, we hammered out an application to the Northern Border Regional Commission's Catalyst Grant Program, and that was submitted on the 18th of April, also for $1 million of construction funding, and notification of awards is at the end of June 27th. In addition to just applying for things and waiting to hear in June and having some back and forth with the funders, we were notified, the town was notified on the 21st of April that the town had been awarded an additional $1 million for project construction through the state's ARPA Village Water and Wastewater Initiative grant funding, which is great. And that is part of that adds to the initial $2.5 million or so that was received last year, for which a portion is currently being used for the design work. And then what's remaining, which we anticipate close to $3 million remaining, will be used as seed money for the construction. So for the town to have seed money for construction in hand is great. Having applications out for other funding is great. And then the last is USDA Rural Development, where there's been the original application was submitted April of last year. And there has been a tremendous amount of turnover with USA Rural Development staff and reduction in staff, like 8 people to 2 people, covering all of Vermont, New Hampshire. But in spite of that, our project has been submitted for federal review, and we're currently working with USA Rural Development and anticipate a grant and loan package this spring. And the dialogue is very positive, and they fully recognize the importance of the project. And it's about trying to figure out a funding package that works for the project. And that is being seen as the primary funding source for construction. On the housing front,
Question.
yep.
Just, in terms of like, elevator speech to people. When
Yeah.
people ask questions.
Please.
Just remind me of the total project cost and with all these, how close, where are the numbers? Total project is 15?
Yeah, so $50 million is what was approved by the voters last year.
Okay.
Yeah, and so
And how much money you got in the bank right now?
so we have $3 million for construction. Out of that amount, we have 2 million more. Oh, thank you. 2 million more that are that we're waiting to hear back on, and then somewhere in essentially that remaining gap being the USA Rural Development amount. So we're waiting to hear and sort of dialing all that in. We've also been told that there's funding for USA Rural Development projects like this currently, and they can say nothing about the future. So bottom line is, well, what I'm hearing is that this is the bite at the apple, and we're going to land this plane.
You're encouraged.
Yes, I am. Yeah, it's been, there's a lot of unpredictable things at the USA Rural Development. Again, with the staffing changes, and we are on our 4th point of contact between January and April. And that initial one is a long time of relationship building, so that is challenging. But we've had a couple of very positive conversations more recently. That's quite encouraging. So there will be a package coming. Anything else about the wastewater? Before I move on, I'm happy to answer any questions. But tune in, participate in the select board meeting this upcoming Monday, and there'll be more. It won't be in super depth, and I think it'll really be lining up what I anticipate to be some sort of working session with the select board to go into the meat of the work and the policy things that are coming down the pike. But getting the funding and having that set is key. So housing, one thing I want to mention that's not in the staff report that I became aware of more recently is the Central Vermont Housing Development Roundtable kickoff meeting that Central Vermont Economic Development Corporation and Central Vermont Regional Planning Commission are co-hosting next week on the 21st of May. And they'll have folks from architect, developers and such talking about networking, idea sharing, kickstarting new projects. So that's a new initiative that taking place in Barrie on the 21st. The Vermont Housing Conservation Board Housing Feasibility Funds. So this is grants to support pre-development costs and feasibility analysis for housing and conservation projects. Ranges about $10,000 for single projects and then goes up from there. Sam identified this and had a note about could be a great opportunity for Warren to consider, specifically as they're looking at the possibility of housing in the village, and obviously unknowns there. I know a bond vote has just been identified for the town garage site. Or the proposed new site, which is great, and this could be used to verify some of the housing situation or opportunity that's there. The application of July 10th for October 2nd board meeting is the upcoming round, and there's a November-January round as well. But it could be used for things like assisting site assessment, environmental site assessment work, and more of that needs to be done, site design, planning, some of that early work. So it's great that there is a fund to support that kind of initiative.
Can I interrupt a second on that? Is the best
Please.
way to get in touch with Sam and follow up, and is that what you'd
Yeah.
recommend?
That sounds good. I mean, we haven't talked about it, but I imagine, I mean, I would be excited to help with that project personally, so I would, yeah, that sounds great to me.
Okay, I will be in touch, Sam. And if I'm not in touch, please be in touch with me.
Yeah, I'll reach out to you if I don't hear from you soon, but,
Thank you.
yeah,
Thank you
we'll,
very
we'll
much.
connect.
Thank you.
Another thing, so I'm gonna jump to disaster resilience topic, and I'm gonna talk about something that's not in the staff report that I became aware. Peter Colgan in Facein reached out to me and shared that he's been working, we're on a valley-wide volunteer emergency response process with each of the emergency management directors in the valley, and he just wanted to make sure we were aware of that, which I thought was great. I think you saw the agenda item on here and that spurred a note. So I don't have anything more, but that was news and great to hear. There's disaster recovery funding update. As an item, this is the state has received $67 million in USDA HUD Community Development Block Grant Disaster Relief Funding in response to the July 2023 floods. $67 million. And they can be used for disaster relief, long-term recovery, restoration of infrastructure and housing, and economic revitalization. And 54 million of it needs to serve the communities of Washington County and one zip code in Lamoille County. They, part of the process is the very first step is that they have to put together a plan on how they're planning on utilizing that funding. The draft plan was released at the end of April. Actually happening right now is one of the hearings on that draft plan. I provided some staff comment on that draft action plan, just trying to understand how it could be utilized and ensuring that in the writing maybe wastewater because it's revitalization. So it's and
resilience.
And resilience, exactly. So that is something we're exploring. So those were submitted. A couple more things on that topic. Flood adaptation training. Handouts or I guess visual aids, nothing more.
So that's 67 million is related to the 2023 flood.
Correct.
Not to the floods exactly on calendar.
Correct. Right, 2023 floods, but it isn't tied to just damage from the 2023 floods.
Okay.
It can be utilized for a variety of different different projects. It's just more that the floods themselves are what triggered the disaster declaration and the funding tied to it. So things that minimize vulnerability in the future, like water system that takes septic fields out of the floodplain in the river corridor and move them to another place. That would be the rationale for wastewater system.
And the agency and department are together basically making all those determinations via their process. Is that how it works?
So HUD will review what the state puts together as its plan.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. There's a
So
bunch of
Joshua someone else is talking. I didn't catch it, but as far as, I mean, obviously Facein took the brunt of this flood, but and needed or needs the most help. Our other towns are also flood prone. So what do you, like with regard to this, I see that you're commenting on it. Is there something that towns should be doing? Or do we just or do we let you do your thing?
Well, I would say don't just rely on me. I mean, the link is in here. Take a look at the link, take a look at the plan, see if there's things in there that you're like, oh, that could work for my town, or see things in the context that aren't in there that could be useful for your town. This is the time to identify projects or sort of policy approaches or like funding approaches that could be really useful. So, I mean, the staff do a really good job of identifying the types of projects, but if you see an opportunity, speak up, provide a comment, engage in the process. Because like I said, it isn't just we were damaged and this is repairing damage. This is about being more resilient in the future. And it's broad, it's economic revitalization, it's infrastructure, it's housing, long-term recovery, a variety of things. So it's a pretty broad tent, but I've been through processes like this in the past, and this is the stage to engage.
So, so there's two links that I see. So under, I'm looking at your staff reports.
Yep.
Disaster resilience, first bullet point, that's the 67 and change.
Yeah,
That's from ACCD, blah, blah, blah. And then the next, the flood resilient communities fund, that's a separate.
that's correct.
How much is in there?
I don't know off the top of my head, that's a statewide fund.
And what link is it that you're referring to?
The link related to, so the disaster recovery funding update, the first one.
First one,
Yep,
The
accd.vermont.gov.
okay.
That's correct. I mean, both of them go, one's ACCD and the other is Vermont Emergency Management.
Got it.
So,
I keep all my links and my acronyms straight.
Yes. So the Department of the Interior National Park Service did a training this week on standards for flood adaptation of historic buildings. It's the sort of where FEMA and historic and National Park Service come together. And a couple of years ago, they came up with this really, really great guide to provide essentially recommendations on to reduce flood vulnerability. And so that was a training I participated in earlier in the week. It was really great. There's more information in the staff report. Madrid Valley flood response, rebuild and resilience discussions. So Friends of Mad River and the Plain Districts are collaborating on some ways to engage the community and bring resources to help understand how how we can be more resilient, but also starting with what are other communities doing. So on the 11th of June, this event will be taking place, the first in this series. John Copans, who is director of the Montpelier Commission for Recovery and Resilience, will be sharing Montpelier's example. We'll have a rep from Plainfield and a rep from Waterbury CREW, which is Community Resilience. I don't know what the acronym is. I didn't write it all out. I should have. But anyway, providing examples on how some communities, neighboring communities are working together to be less vulnerable going forward. So that's a learning opportunity coming up. On the municipal side, I just want to highlight the Irisville Village Master Planning Steering Committee, not to steal Jonathan's thunder, but one piece in particular I wanted to highlight with that effort is that the consultant and reps from the Village Master Planning Steering Committee will be meeting with the State Wetlands Office next week to continue the dialogue, which sort of began at the very beginning of the process. And now that there's some things to react to, we'll be meeting with them next week, which is great. In Warren, Sam and I are scheduled to meet with Ruth from the town on the potential neighborhood development area application, which could be supportive of future housing in the village. And I'm almost done. I came across an additional resource today that I'd like to send out, but in light of the conversation that we had at our last meeting, Christian Meyer from CVRPC shared about Act 181 and the sort of designation 2050 Reform Act of Act 181. And there's sort of like two pieces. There's the designation program, and then there is there's different tiers for Act 250. And ACCD, the Agency of Commerce Community Development, just released today a report on the summarizing the new designation programs. So that document just came out, is something that that I'm happy to send out to folks afterwards.
That'd be great, thanks.
Yeah, it's quite exciting. So those are the things that I have, and I'm going to kick it over to Sam.
Sounds good. Dan, just cut me off if whenever you need to, but I'll share some things real quick. So just an update on the Conservation Recreation Visioning Project. So you guys probably have heard that term floating around just because it's been going on for the last couple of years. Basically, a group of 15 different trail and conservation organizations that came together to figure out how can we balance both having a community that's deeply rooted in recreation, but also that, you know, values its natural resources and make sure that they're not kind of conflicting with one another. So striking that balance and coming up with some best practices for things like trail development. The first phase of that project is kind of coming to a close. And now we're moving on to the second phase. And the final community forum is going to be taking place. Yeah, we have a flyer here. Unfortunately, we're running out of ink, so it doesn't look too hot. But then the last.
It's more creative.
The last community forum is next Wednesday. It's gonna be at LaRue. There's gonna be a potluck for the first hour. Make sure to bring some utensils and a plate. And then afterwards, there'll be a presentation about kind of the whole project. And some of the deliverables that were created as a result of that. There's a shared vision and guiding principles document that the group came up with. And then they're also gonna have a little skit about trail building in the Mad River Valley. So definitely worth coming to that event. Should be fun and get some food as well. So, oh, it's a potluck. And also as part of that project, I helped the group kind of come up with, you know, the roadshow that we do with the Mad River Valley Annual Data Report. I helped them come up with similar slides for that. They're going to be doing kind of a presentation circuit. I will not be joining them for the presentations, but I helped them with that, and they'll be joining us on June 19th to share some of the findings from that project. Quick update on the Vermont 100 Active Transportation Corridor project. So we had our second public meeting towards the end of March that presented the alternatives to the community. And by and large, everyone strongly favored the multi-use path approach, which was great for us to see because I know it's kind of what excited me the most as well. And in the middle of April, we had a meeting with VHB, and essentially after the public meeting, VHB took the voting and the preferences from the community, and then they came up with kind of an adapted proposal of what they saw could be a feasible way to build this path. But at the end of the day, they emphasized to the advisory committee that they'll come up with their recommendation or kind of an updated layout. But at the end of the day, it's up to the advisory committee what route they want to pursue. Do we want to be fully off-road path? Do we want to have some shared sections with expanded shoulders? And at that meeting, the presentation that VHB gave us, it had a lot of off-road path, but there also were a considerable number of sections that they had proposed some expanded shoulders. So essentially sharing the road with vehicles, but with a little bit more space. And the advisory committee decided that it's really important to them that we have it maintained fully off-road for the entirety of the corridor. So we all drafted a letter to VHB, basically with the understanding that we can always, if we ask for too little, it'll be very hard to get more later on. Whereas if we ask for what we really want and come up with a segmenting that makes sense with the understanding that it might not all happen overnight, that's the route that they preferred. So now the next steps will be to receive their updated scoping study report that should be coming in tomorrow morning. The advisory committee will have a week to provide feedback. Once we have that feedback, we'll send it to VHB. They'll incorporate some edits, and then from there it goes to VTrans for their review, which could take a couple weeks. In conjunction with all of that, Josh mentioned earlier, we're hoping to co-locate a section of the path, the first segment of the path with some of the construction that's going to be occurring for the wastewater project. But it comes with some complications because the timeline for the wastewater project is aiming for construction in 2026 for that segment. We essentially had to talk to VTrans and see, based on the fact that some of the federal processes that need to occur have already occurred for the wastewater project, could we expedite some of those aspects of the active transportation corridor? To be more specific, things like NEPA review, you know, they have conducted a NEPA review for the wastewater project, but it's for a narrower, I think it's like 6 feet wide right of way, whereas the path would be 10 or 12 feet. So trying to understand, we know we might have to do something, but is there any way we
Make you
could,
do it all over.
yeah, is there any way we could expedite that? And just emphasizing the cost sharing that while you already have contractors on the ground, you could save a lot of time and money. So VHB and Dubois and King, and the scoping study team have all met to discuss kind of what would that look like? How could VHB, or Dubois and King come up with pricing to understand what the difference that our project would add to the wastewater project and how we can come up with that difference. So where it stands now is if, we have a meeting scheduled with Peter Pochop to discuss in more depth whether or not they'll be okay with us kind of
Yeah,
expediting that
That's the
process.
V-Trans.
Yeah.
Funder.
But if we get the green light, our plan is to apply for a bike and pedestrian, V-Trans bike and pedestrian. Grant, essentially that application would be due on July 11th. And if we do not get the green light, we'll creative problem solve something. Misha's got a million different ideas, so we'll see what he comes up with.
How long a segment is that?
I think it's around a mile. I
Yeah,
can't really
it's about a
remember. Yeah, a little bit less or a little bit more than a mile.
LaRue to Kingsbury, it's a mile.
Okay.
I did my green up day on that.
Oh, nice. So a mile.
So it's a mile there and a mile.
Thank
back.
you for confirming.
And
Another update on a different path project, the Sugar Bush Access Road Shared Use Path. We're still in the property owner outreach phase. I did a site visit with the property manager at the Maples last month, which went really well. They essentially said they're willing to support the project. They had some concerns mainly with the crosswalk that's right near Paradise Provisions, or that's slated to be there. They don't think that's a great place for it. So I made that concern. I shared that concern with Brian and VHB. They have verified that legally there's sufficient site distances, but the Maples thought maybe it wasn't the best place. So I've shared that with the engineers, but they were extremely supportive of the project overall. And there's one potential hiccup. The Bridges property was flagged as potentially historic. I guess like our, I don't know what the term would be, but the person overseeing the grant doesn't think it's gonna be a huge issue, but they just need to do a little bit more research because buildings older than 50 years are flagged as potentially historic. All the other properties on that section, some of them are over 50 years, but they've had substantial enough renovations that they weren't flagged during that review. So not likely to, we're not anticipating a huge delay, but just have to do a little bit more digging into that property. The next meeting is gonna be on June 9th, so we should learn a little bit more then. And then the last thing that I'll quickly highlight is we had additional meetings with Green Mountain Transit regarding the MAD bus Valley Floor service. So last month we highlighted that in the V-Trans performance route performance report, Valley Floor was flagged as underperforming, and it had been for a couple of years. So we had initial discussions about could we creatively problem solve instead of reducing the service, could we potentially come up with a way to increase ridership to essentially lower the overall cost per rider. That was the main concern on their end. We need to reduce the cost per rider, and we thought instead of cutting service, we could just increase ridership. Through additional conversations with GMT and V-Trans had a few meetings without us, and V-Trans confirmed that the route will need to be addressed through a combination of either additional financial contributions, service cuts to underperforming midday runs, increasing ridership, or alternate routing configurations. So essentially we'll have to probably pursue a combination of those. What we're looking into right now are alternate routing configurations, hopefully obviously increasing ridership, and also most likely financial contributions as well. We're gonna have some more meetings in the coming weeks to specifically understand like what could an alternate schedule look like if there were gonna be service cuts. But our most recent meeting was just kind of the season wrap up. The good news is, in the most recent meeting that we had on May 9th, GMT reported that ridership increased by 25% overall compared to last year, for the whole MAD bus service, so all of the routes. And the Valley Floor was actually up 34% from last year. So it's underperforming, but it had a pretty notable increase from year over year. The average ridership on Sundays was 71, 41 riders on average for Saturdays, and 20 average riders for the weekdays.
I
Um,
do believe they're asking for another $80,000 from us.
They're asking for 80,000?
I believe so, I'm gonna look it up.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I was looking it up myself, so.
I had in here, so you probably know better than I do. I had in my notes 50,000, but maybe it changed.
So just for context, so the way the bus works, there's a local contribution, which is a portion of the cost to run the bus. 95% of that contribution approximately comes from Sugarbush. So the municipalities do not pay for this winter service. Sugarbush is the almost exclusively the local contributor. And I was actually gonna look at what the magnitude is. It's over $100,000 a year.
Right now it is, and I believe it was going up to 180.
So that,
That's where that 80 came from. I think it might be less, because I
Mhm.
think we went up from 85 to 120 last year, something like that.
yeah,
So yes, we're not just accepting that increase. So there's gonna be another
Understood.
discussion.
yes.
Yeah,
And Joel's done a
Yep,
great job
yep,
of
he's doing a
representing
good
so
job.
far.
but we are in our budgeting season.
Yeah.
Last year's contribution was 126,000.
There you go.
This year it's gone up to 176.
So
So-
50.
Or they're asking for 176, but they're also, I mean, there's been a fair amount of turnover in their property, and they're comparing us to both Killington and Stowe. Where Killington and Stowe have a lot of other contributors other than the ski mountain,
Mhm.
town of Rutland. Ski shops, that sort of thing, so.
Yeah.
It's not an apples to apples situation. Just to bring it up from our point of view.
Mhm.
Fully understood.
The last thing is also related to transportation, but a little bit more lighthearted. The Weight House, we're calling it the Weight House e-bike demonstration project. So the Mad River Path applied for a grant. It was a Mobility and Transportation Innovations Grant from V-Trans last year. And it was for 22,000 to essentially buy 3 e-bikes, one for each organization in the Weight House. But so that was fully funded. We recently received the bikes, but part of the project also is kind of like a community education an outreach facet. So we are using the bikes, but also anyone in the community that is interested in riding an e-bike is welcome to do so. Right now, we don't really have a formal process, so I just put in the staff report to reach out to myself or Misha if you want to take an e-bike on a spin, but
All right,
they're a lot of fun and I highly recommend it. If it's a beautiful day and you want to go grocery shopping, load up the panniers and. go
And
for a
they're- and
spin.
they're-
Are they like cargo bikes?
Yeah, they're cargo bikes and they are high quality cargo bikes. I mean,
Mhm.
there are advertisements online for a variety of electric bikes, but the two companies are Cannondale and Tern, Tern. Yeah, it's been fun understand the differences between them, and we're using them every single day. So cool.
I have a mountain bike, an e-mountain bike that I got when I had my knee surgery last year for commuting
Mhm.
around, take it down back and forth from my house to PT and stuff.
Yeah, right, you can, right, yeah, it definitely helps with elevation and distance. And I mean, Sam's been commuting to work a couple of times from his house in East Warren.
Mhm.
So It's
Fun.
great.
Yeah.
Hey, is that are we, not to be rude and interrupt, but have we concluded the staff report? Okay,
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you, Sam, and thank you, Joshua.
you're welcome.
The next item on the agenda, we return to number 1, and that is administration, MRVPD Code of Conduct. Let's call it number 6 to avoid confusion. Number 6, MRVPD Code of Conduct and Conflict of Interest Policy signatures. We have 10 minutes allocated. Joshua, is the plan there just to, I'm not there, but I assume you have hard copies and you're going to send those around and folks will take a few minutes to sign?
Yes, so the Code of Conduct and Conflict of Interest Policy was passed by the steering committee back in January of this year, at the January meeting. I have a full copy of the full policy, but at the very end, there is an acknowledgement form. So there's an acknowledgement piece. Oh, yeah, I guess this printed weird. So the intention is to have all members sign, and they have them on file. So we will send out digitally. We'll make that as a task tomorrow to identify who we're missing.
Yeah.
Get those signatures.
Party actions heading, but there's nothing about parties. At this point.
Sorry, you missed your window to make an amendment.
Party action, come on.
It's just misnumbered. It's not,
Is it misnumbered?
it's just the page 3 should be page 2. And continuing.
Oh, yes, you're right. Almost. Yeah.
Dave, did I hear you say you found a misnumbering?
It's just the page numbers are. It goes from no number on the first page, to page 3 on the second page.
Got it. Well, I'm concerned because the agenda went from Roman numeral 5 back to Roman numeral 1. So we may be confronting an issue here that the steering committee needs to look into.
Well, I will say, if you go to the agendas and minutes section of the website now, the Roman numerals are correct. But I just realized that this afternoon when I was going through and prepping, and I was like, oh, Roman numerals are wrong. So anyway, I've updated the agenda to reflect the proper numbering.
Thank you, Joshua. I would also say with the number of lawyers on the steering committee, maybe we should not delve into numbering because that tends not to be our area of expertise.
The right way to do it and the wrong way. Well, at the risk of making the lawyers especially uncomfortable, under the topic of administration, there is an additional item that I would like to cover, which is signatories for the bank. Now that we have a change of who the executive committee it is Dan, Chuck, and Jonathan is ensuring all three of them can be signatories onto the Northfield Savings Bank account. And I have a resolution here that I'd like to read real quickly. Is it okay if I jump right into this? I didn't really give you an opportunity to say no.
It's fine with me. Does anyone object? And Joshua, it might help, I haven't been involved in the check signing before. So can you give a brief background on, or maybe you're planning to do that, in which case I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no, we don't. Great lead in. So when it comes to check signing, per the bylaws of the planning district that were passed recently, it clarified who has the authority to be a signatory onto the account. As essentially who signs the checks. Where our process happens now, invoices are received, a combination of Sam and our bookkeeper process, cut checks, and they're signed by one of the individuals that are named. And again, the authority is the chair, or to clarify, the chair, the vice chair, and then the secretary treasurer. And that is Dan, Jonathan, and Chuck. So now that Brian Shoup is no longer on the Plain District Steering Committee, we are proposing to remove him as a signatory from the Plain District's bank account and add and ensure these three current members who have the authority can do so. So the document says, whereas the steering committee of the Planning District has determined to add new signatories to the Planning District's bank account, number 6080, well, I'll pass around, you can look at more detail, in Northfield Savings Bank. Therefore, be resolved that the following individuals are hereby authorized to act as signatories of the Planning District's bank account at Northfield Savings Bank, and we'll be removing Brian Shoup. And those three people are Dan, Chuck, and Jonathan. So I'm happy to pass this around. It just, we are hoping to have have this resolution passed, then it requires a witness.
And I should mention that at the steering committee, the executive committee meeting, you know, one of the proposals under consideration was to have the bookkeeper be a signatory. And Chuck, I think Chuck and both Jonathan said it really makes more sense to separate those functions. So that's how we ended up with the 3 executive committee members, if that's helpful. Do you want to proceed with a motion, Joshua? Is that the way you think this should go, or do folks need?
Well, so this document was essentially written last year, and Bob Ackland drafted it. I don't even honestly know if we need a motion. The main thing is that, I mean, I don't think it hurts to have a motion. I think having a motion that clarifies that these are the 3 individuals who will have to be signatories on the Northwood Savings Bank account for the Plain District. I think that needs to be the motion. I think this was just a way to clarify that that's been done, and if the bank needed,
I think we
needed
we give
documentation,
them this. at
we
the
will
bank,
give them
in
this.
addition to some information from you all.
That's right. So for example, I'll need to go to NSB and in person and say I'm one of the signatories. Okay, that's a good reminder.
And just yeah, I was gonna say, you need your driver's license, and so you don't need your social security card, but you just need to know the number and then like birthday, other stuff like that. But driver's license is the big one.
So should we move to adopt this then?
Yeah,
So
that'd
I'll
be great.
move to adopt the resolutions for our bank account.
We have a motion from Jonathan. Do we have a second? We have a
Second.
second from Paul. All in favor? Please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any objections? Any abstentions? No, hearing none, the motion carries.
I said aye, but I was muted.
Oh, thank you, Eric.
And Josh, I'll come by and sign those tomorrow.
Okay, great. Code card's the only one, but yeah, it requires witnesses.
That's what-
It's just legal language. It requires authorized people. The in witness whereof is just a dumb old legal phrase, but this just needs to be signed by people on the steering committee enough to move it.
It is okay.
If the bank requires that, like, we just took enough action, this is like dumb corporate lawyer stuff, but we just took a sufficient action that if we have the minutes from this meeting, we can just take that to the bank
Oh, okay,
and they can
Yeah.
rely on that. That's legally binding. This would be if we didn't do it at the meeting.
got
We
it.
could sign this separately and do a written consent. We can do both. Doesn't
I
matter.
don't think it hurts to do both.
They might like to see something with a signature on it. So the only thing I'd say is it might help to have not me and Dan and Chuck sign it.
So you need.
That's what I was
Paul
thinking.
and-
Like Paul and Dave could.
Dude, sign it and then maybe have,
Great.
yeah. So
Thank you for clarifying the corporate lawyers,
what I'm here for.
amongst other things. Thank you, Jonathan. Great.
Are we ready to move on to new business, you think? Okay, the first item under new business is July 10th, 2024 flood event lessons and opportunities. We have 20 minutes scheduled for this.
Great, thank you. So I'm kind of carrying the water from Chuck Martell. We had an executive committee meeting last week, and Chuck brought something forward that he sort of a lesson learned in Facein in regards to the flooding. And one, just wanting to share that broadly with the other towns. And second, see if there's any more input. And third, is there a possible action? So Chuck highlighted at that executive committee meeting about specifically reimbursement with FEMA. So they had the July 10th event. And when that event happened, Dunbar Hill Road in particular was one road that was hit exceedingly hard. And they showed up on the 11th of July, looked at what they had in front of them, and they said, not only is this road gone, but everything's gone, including the culverts for all of the private driveways. And they were fully aware that the policy, the road policy for Facein, says that it is not the town of Facein's responsibility to take care of private culverts. But given the fact that it was such a bad situation and that people were otherwise stranded, and couldn't access their homes, and it was the right thing to do, they went forward and it was part and parcel with the road work. They did that work. And since that time, they've learned from FEMA that $20,000 or so they spend is non-reimbursable. Because the town of Facein does not have language that says in the case of emergency, they'd have the authority to do this. And so that was like, that's one lesson learned, and sort of begged the question, well, one, we don't want to be in the situation again. So what language could and should we propose to address that? Two, what about our other towns? Are they in a similar vulnerable situation or not? So that was the first example. The second, which is tied, and the second is about the sort of mutual aid response that happened from the flooding. So during the flood response, the different towns, specifically Warren and Facein, and potentially Moortown, but I don't know. But I know Waitsfield and Warren both assisted the town of Facein with hauling, with trucks, with material, essentially town staff support. And like we value so much in our towns, it's the relationships that allow things to happen, but that informal relationships have limitations. And one of those limitations was FEMA will not reimburse for the time spent from the other towns, because there is not an MOU or an intermunicipal agreement saying that that's the way things are done. So essentially increased formality to address these things if there's an interest in being reimbursed. So one, highlighting that that's Facein's recent experience with FEMA, wanting to share that with the other towns. Are other towns aware of like, have you put in language to address these things? Chances are probably not. And we were talking, Sam and I, in addition to the executive committee, about the possibility of the planning district staff helping our towns deal with this, to create a quick summary document. This is a situation. Second, what are the ways to deal with it? Work with Vermont League of Cities and Towns and get some proposed language and put together a proposal for each of them. The MOU is probably a little bit more complicated than the road policy, because there could be other things in a mutual aid agreement or an MOU that could go beyond that, but at least a place to start. And so we wanted to, again, share the experience of Facein, identify this as a potential opportunity for planning district staff to help. And do people think that's a good idea, or any other suggestions? Are there other examples of other things that could fit within this realm that should be part of the scope?
Have you discovered this has happened in other places in the state? I can't imagine that this was like the first time that this has occurred.
Yeah, I mean, my understanding that this is the way it works now, right? No matter where you are, you need more formal agreements.
Right, so those agreements, there's an agreement, there's a model document out there.
My guess
Right,
is
right.
exactly.
You don't have to
I don't see it to be a large work task. It's just more piecing all these things together and communicating with the different select boards.
I would love that help.
Great,
Yes.
great. Yeah, I mean, we thought it was a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, there's not a rep from the Warren Select Board here, but I think the Warren Select Board also should be advised. I'm very happy if MRVPD staff have the time and inclination to do that, because I think that gives you guys great visibility. But if you don't have the time, of course, I'll add it to my to-do list. But it seems to me like it's a nice, easy win for the MRVPD, you know?
Well, you'll see Kaylee tomorrow, you said, right?
Yeah. I'm gonna meet with Kaylee tomorrow. I'm scheduled to meet with her tomorrow, so I'll chat with her then. But yeah, Sam and I chatted, and Sam would take this on as a task, and he has the bandwidth, so we'll move
Oh,
forward.
awesome.
Okay.
Well, as you're doing it, I'm happy to,
That'd be great, yeah.
sure.
All right, then I'll let Sam run with it. I think it's a great idea. when I think about the MOU, it's interesting, like you're saying, Joshua. On the one hand, it sounds like FEMA wants the MOU to be sort of legally binding, but I guess the reality on the ground is towns help out as they're able, help each other out as they're able. So that must be I'm guessing that's the needle we have to thread. If it's just one town that's been impacted, easy enough. I don't want to say easy enough, but of course the other towns will devote their resources. But if multiple towns are hit simultaneously, we don't want to legally, anyway. So,
Exactly.
Yeah, it should be authority, not obligation.
Right.
Is that enough for them?
Exactly, and I think that that's part of the process is figuring out what language is already out there that FEMA is comfortable with, and then make sure it fits the circumstance here. I mean, this is one of the things that became clear to me in the effort that we had in supporting specifically FACEIT after the July 10th, 2024 event was how much we rely on informal relationships. How that event happened and I called up Patty, who I know Patty's been at FACEIT as long as I've been working at the planning district. So I knew who to call and said, how can I help? And she said, this is how you can help. And that's great, so long as I know Patty. But Patty has since retired, right? And so just knowing that we rely on informal relationships and we're comfortable with that, but there are times where having some more structure could be more supportive and it might be able to last beyond individuals, and also can ensure recouping funds. And
So the town of Warren submitting an invoice is not sufficient.
Well-
What if they had hired a site work contractor to do the whole?
So I called Sarah yesterday. So Sarah's the treasurer at FACEIT. So I chatted with Sarah before we were gonna talk about this tonight, just to see like what their FACEIT's thoughts on the whole situation were. And the way Sarah explained it to me is essentially what you said is that could have been enough. So the MOU would still be a good idea, I think, because in like a crisis situation, like you're prone to forget to like send an invoice, for instance, but Sarah did say, from FEMA's perspective, Waitsfield's road crew were being paid by Waitsfield during the time they were doing that work. And because Waitsfield didn't invoice FACEIT for those costs, they said that the road crew was not acting as volunteers. So FACEIT wasn't entitled to any reimbursement for that because Waitsfield had already paid the crew. So I think if they had submitted an invoice to FACEIT and FACEIT paid it, then FACEIT could say, hey, we paid Waitsfield town staff and we need to be reimbursed for that. But having both still be a good option.
yeah, so I think the MOU is part of it, and the other part is what structurally, how do you navigate that? And the reality is, in a moment of crisis, we navigate however we can to get through said crisis. So if there's some ways to have additional coverage, and that's what we're looking to explore. Yeah. That's all I have.
Before you move on, so are we saying that the best practice going forward when one of our towns voluntarily assists another town is they should really send an invoice?
They want to be compensated for the hours.
Yeah, and I think we'll learn more throughout this process. I don't really know enough to say like if the MOU itself would be enough that then they could retroactively get reimbursed, or if an invoice would also be required. That's just from the brief conversation with Sarah, she said in absence of the MOU, if they had invoiced, that would have been enough.
They had to have paid it, or it would just have to?
FACEIT would have paid the invoice that Waitsfield
And then
sent
got.
and then
FACEIT
got
would have been
reimbursed. I don't know, like, if we were to have an MOU, I don't know if you would still have to invoice or if the MOU would be enough. I would imagine invoicing is a good idea. I just don't know.
So
Yeah, I mean, I get it, but the optics are not, in some ways I don't like the optics of it. Okay, so Warren helped FACEIT voluntarily, but now we're going to invoice a town that, I mean, I get Jim's point. If it was a private contractor, you'd have to pay them. So, but
And that might I
It
guess
feels
what I'm saying
nice.
is-
It feels
it-
nice not to invoice when we're trying to help our neighbor out in an emergency.
Well, I guess if that labor was provided voluntarily, what is Facein looking for to be compensated for?
Right.
But if Waitsfield provided the labor and the trucking voluntarily,
Mhm.
what is Facein looking for to become? Are they looking for additional funds to be put?
Well,
somewhere
and I
else?
would think that it's,
I just,
yeah,
I think I mean, I think the short answer is, I don't really know enough to say concretely, but I think in this case, Waitsfield was paying their staff
The
to
staff was
do
already
work
on the
in
job.
another town
right,
when they didn't have to. So Facein is looking for funds, I would imagine, to make Waitsfield whole.
which would be my guess, right?
right.
So. As I said before, the road policy piece is really clear. The MOU in the intermunicipal agreement part is less clear. And that's one, I mean, the bottom line is our goal is to identify what are the ways that we can respond. And have the structures in place to reimburse as necessary when these situations happen. So it could be, that side of it could be a much larger thing as we dig into it, but we're gonna start with the road policy.
Thank you. And I saw Eric had his hand up. Eric?
Yeah, my only question was, Josh, I know we've had some discussions in the past about accounting for time and in-kind expenditures from various organizations in the grant writing process.
Mhm.
And does that have any value from your perspective? Just to quantify those kinds of things, because I know we kind of wing it in the grants, right?
Right. Yeah. So I'm not quite seeing how that relates to the particular discussion we're having. Maybe I'm just missing it.
I'm sorry, just is it something, from your perspective, is it something that you're interested in having for the planning district's purposes too?
Yeah, I mean, not related to FEMA. I mean,
Right.
But generally, one of the things we've talked about is, yeah, more clearly, keeping track of how we're spending our time and how we're leveraging the planning district's resources for our partners.
I
Yeah.
think Eric raised an interesting point because you guys were out there, not with your trucks, but with measuring. And as I understand it, Joshua, right? Weren't you and Sam out there helping to measure the damage?
Yeah, we're
So,
doing
I mean,
damage
I think
assessment.
Eric has a fair point, which is, should, if towns are being made whole,
Yeah.
perhaps the MRVPD should also we should attempt to make the MRVPD whole as well. Of course, you have the added complication that we get our budgets from the towns in Sugarbush. So I don't know if that changes things, but I think Eric raises an interesting point.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, I think we are a union municipal district. I honestly didn't think about it in those terms at all, but we'll include that in our analysis. Thank you, Eric.
Okay, is that the end of the flood event lessons and opportunities? I think that's excellent. Thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a really great way to bring value, to show value to our towns. Yet another way to show value to our towns. The next topic under new business is community development initiatives. At the risk of being repetitive, I'll kind of kick this one off again, if that's okay, Joshua. So I think I may have mentioned this last meeting. I certainly mentioned it at the executive committee meeting. But the Warren Planning Commission has a number of younger members, and I mean members in their 30s. And in talking to them and hearing their concerns about the town, sort of this, bad on me for living in a bubble. But it's clear that post-COVID, it became clear to me that post-COVID, it really feels like, at least to them, that something's been lost. And once they pointed that out, I had to agree that there's been a sort of a loss of community, and if you're a newer person to town, at least in Warren, what's going on, beyond, say, the 4th of July. What's going on for people to gather together. I mean, the Big Picture just did a great event across the valley, where people gathered together. So I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but we were at the Warren Planning Commission, we were sort of brainstorming, what can we do from, call it community development, to re-strengthen those ties that COVID, I think, frayed pretty badly, at the most extreme angle. And this is really about sort of visitors during COVID. If you had an out-of-state license plate, people were giving you the finger maybe and saying, go home, get out of here. Or even just, for like locals, permanent residents only, like what's going on? Where do we gather? Where do we strengthen our ties? So we're not relating to each other as like, you know what, you're making a lot of noise and that's bothering me. Or I don't like the smells emanating from your coffee roaster or whatever. I don't know. So that's, we're talking about having sort of a Warren version of the roundup. And some of the younger folks, the fun people on the Planning Commission, are working on that idea. It won't be as fun as the roundup because we don't have a liquor license, but something where we can gather. So that's my
Oh,
lengthy.
it was approved at our last meeting.
Was it?
Oh, was it? Oh, great.
Yeah. May
So,
21st it starts.
So I think Waitsfield seems to be doing a little bit better job. Anyway, that's my rambling introduction. But the sense of strengthening community ties and generally what I'd call, or what Joshua titles, community development initiatives. Joshua, can I ask you to, if that's.
Yeah. Yeah, so the idea was just to have a discussion, right? Like understanding what Dan's sharing. I mean, are other people seeing similar things? And then wanted to maybe highlight a couple either opportunities or things that are moving in that direction, and then ask the question about, is there a role for the planning district to play in this? Real quickly, I mean, I can think about the bigger picture. So the big pick, and I was hoping that you could share a little bit about what's happening there.
Yeah, so 20 years ago when Claudia and Eugene bought it, I think they had an original vision and did for a while kind of as a community space, and then COVID really hit hard and it became tough to staff. And they went down to 4 nights a week, just first run movies. They didn't have a lot of other events. They had some, but not a ton. And then with staffing and profitability challenges, they closed in November, and it kind of faced a fork in the road. Do we look to sell this and move on and lose that community space, or do we try and figure something else out? And there were a number of communities around the country who had tried to save their independent movie theaters, and this is in contrast to all the theaters in Burlington and elsewhere in Vermont that are closing or closed last year. And so there was community enthusiasm at a party in December, and it was basically resolved to attempt to open it as a community nonprofit. And yeah, so now we have a 12-member board, and a manager and an executive committee on that board that does day-to-day things. And the model basically is to rely on membership and volunteer contributions to help cover operating costs and staffing needs where necessary. And it's been a successful fundraising start and membership drive to begin. And we are, we had our grand opening party. You can send around some pictures. It was a great event. And we are now open. The films are running. We are still doing some staffing up and building repairs and modifications that we need to do. But by July, we hope, or certainly this summer, we'll be open for a wider range of events, including, well, there are already some on the calendar, which you can go look at the calendar on the website. Concerts, lectures, kids camps. There's a speakeasy film series on Saturday evenings, And we're also open as a community space for community events, like on Monday, Candace White gave an update on the future of healthcare in the valley. And, you know, as appropriate and with sensitivity to our revenue, like that it's available for free for community events. And then the non-blue theater will be available for community parties and gathering spaces. And people just need to request that. And I just want to emphasize, we're not quite ready yet for the next couple of months. While some things get finished, but yeah, we're very excited. And you know, I think there's some other spaces around town which other people might want to talk about, afterthoughts. And yeah, we're just excited for the future and to see this model working, at least for the first 6 months of having a lot of dedicated people working very hard on it.
Excellent, thank you.
2 comments.
Yeah.
Party was great, and saw Sam, bumped into a lot of people I know, and yeah, you know, super well attended. And then a week later, my wife, Catherine, and Julie Parker went to Thunderbolts,
Mhm.
and they were the only 2 people in the theater.
Yeah.
And my wife came home just all fired up about that.
Yeah.
Because she had a conversation, I think in the other theater, Kevin was in there watching a hockey game. And there's a bunch, there was like, you know, like 15 dudes in there watching hockey, which was great, but 2 people at Thunderbolt. And there's a marquee out on Route 100. And Catherine was like, why don't you, you know, it just said we're reopening May 1st.
I agree.
I'd go out and buy some letters and put movie tonight.
I believe they have the letters.
Okay, cause she talked to somebody like, oh, well, like a lot of, you know, it's hard and the letters are missing and broken and blah, blah, blah. I mean, come on, it's such like. It's like
Yep.
such a Vermont, I use that as pejorative, such a Vermonty response, like it's too hard to put up letters that advertise a movie. And, you know, and you need that by the road. I look, when I'm driving by, well, I shouldn't even say that because I know there was a bad accident there. But you know, trying to strain to see the marquee
Sure.
above the entryway is difficult
Yep.
and dangerous.
Well, I'll take that recommendation back, and yeah, I mean, it's, you know, our goal was and it was a rush to get it reopened.
Yeah.
But it's the board's job
Yeah.
to
If
make
there's a
sure.
sign- If there's a sign that says reopening May 1st, and for a lot of like donuts on Saturday, right, you know, I mean.
No, it's the
Thanks,
board, it's
Steve.
the board's job to make sure that it's not just on
Because a lot of
a,
people don't
I
know.
hope people know we're open model, right?
Yeah, they don't know.
We will make sure that
Yeah, nobody-
changes and
nobody-
they're the right advertising, the right SEO, and I'll take the letters back.
So I can tell my wife that
So that's a space that, as you said, was intention of a community space that closed in this reopening in this newer model.
Yeah.
To serve, amongst other things, a physical location where events can happen, where community members can cross and
Correct.
interact with each other and build the social capital that's the fabric of our community.
Yep.
Other examples or other sort of experiences with that, or
Can I interrupt and ask Dave one question? Joshua, sorry. So what
Okay.
will make this work? Like, what do you need? Like, I mean, we went to the opening party. I have not been back, you know, and I have a feeling that's not enough. That we need to be going there and spending.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, the question is, how's it gonna work? Yeah, so.
Well, I
think-
don't know. I'm just trying to think, is it like, yeah, I mean, I guess as a community member who wants this to work, you know, and as a community who wants this to work, it seems like we've got to go there and spend some money to make sure it works, right? That's.
I think that will be an important component of it, yes, to get people actually coming. The memberships help us get to at least for this year, where we need to be pretty much already, and so we're now, it's, like I just mentioned, it's the board's job to make sure that movies are advertised and, you know, the restaurant's not open yet. But, yes, part of this is saying, okay, you attended one party, but community, you need to step up and make sure that you value this with your time and money, and, you know, ultimately that will be the proof of whether it works. And, you
And
know,
advertise it, the Stanley Cup playoffs are playing in one of this year.
totally.
Yeah, I didn't.
I've already asked to do Premier League soccer in the mornings. No, but we are, as I hope I made clear, and we are still staffing up, training volunteers
Yeah.
to be able to run the equipment, because we do not have the paid staff to be like, let's go 24/7 on this, you know, and make it available. So we will need to, with membership money and volunteer time, make up that gap. And then the third piece, I think, is community time, spending, and resources. So, yeah, thanks for that.
And so another space where that's in the front page of today's Valley Reporter is the Waitsfield Village Meeting House. So home of the Waitsfield United Church of Christ. And the article speaks to a meeting that happened on the 12th, earlier this week, where there's essentially exploration of different ownership models. That's puts the management of the facility, the structure, and the church building in the hands of an entity that can manage and maintain it. As identified in the article, the Waitsfield Village Meeting House building is currently home to the congregation, and various community organizations are utilizing specifically the downstairs space. In 2024, there were 700 hours of community activities in that building. In 2018, post Irene, was a large project dealing with the impact of Irene and building enhancements for the church, and it raised over $800,000 of investment in that building. And it's a much more usable space than it was before. Everything from ADA accessibility and dealing with mold issues and so on, and reducing vulnerability to future floods. But the church is looking at recognizing that there are, to use Reverend Mark's language, there's nobody coming up behind us. And to maintain this space in the future. And one quote that I thought was of interest in the article is, the issue isn't money, it's people available to plunger the toilet. We have the money currently, but what we really need is 10 to 20 people to steward a maker's fair or an event and clean the floors afterwards and take out the trash. We can't staff all of that. Sounds very similar.
It's very
right?
similar.
Right, and so here's another space that has served a community function for which there's interest to continue to serve that role, but also not really knowing what the model is. Not the place of having a model and that energy to make that happen. So there's sort of like another thing happening in our community at this particular time that I think is worth highlighting. And they had about 20 or so folks at the meeting, in great discussion, but neither Sam nor I were able to attend on Monday.
I was actually at that meeting.
Were you there?
It was a good meeting, yeah.
Great. Great, thank you.
Yeah, attendance was good, and I thought the discussion was really helpful. And one thing that was, I think, important to take away from that, and might actually dovetail well with the experience that the bigger picture will give the community, is that they're not under a strict timeline here. It really is, thankfully, very forward-looking. It is very much we have the sort of old guard that is looking after things today, but there isn't that next generation that wants to come in and take over and continue to run it within the church community. And so they're not talking about, running out of money soon. They're not talking about a need to sort of offload the building in the next year or 18 months even. They're looking at, several years. And so if, we are, successful as a community in supporting the bigger picture, and we prove this model of these sort of community supported spaces, I think that either, I don't want to suggest that the bigger picture take on more work, than it's already doing, but it's possible that some group of people who have the experience from that, or people who are inspired by that, could come in and do a very similar thing in that space, because they really are looking for exactly that. They're looking for their ideal. I mean, every person on the committee from within the church who spoke basically said their ideal scenario is that a nonprofit group who's motivated to do community, building work will take over the space, become the stewards of the space. And their dream is that that organization will allow the church to continue convening and using that space as the church. But they're not even viewing that as a strict requirement, that they would cede the space entirely if that's what it took to keep the building serving the community the way it is, and they would be able to hold their church where, the church is not the space, right, in their view. And so I really respect that view, but I also think that it's important, we have in our community in Waitsfield, two very opposite end of the spectrums examples of what can happen to a downtown church, right? We have the UCC, which is vibrant and serves as a community center, and I'm not even sure what the other church was when it was operating as a church. It's now
The old Methodist Church.
Methodist Church, now in very serious disrepair. Great intentions on the part of the owners, who've done a lot of work in the valley to try to build housing, but it's an incredibly expensive building to maintain as a private owner. And it would be a real shame for our downtown area for the UCC church to fall into similar condition, which I don't think is a imminent problem, but is what can happen when, the community doesn't support its infrastructure. And so I came out of that meeting feeling like I'm very grateful to that church community for coming to the realization that they were at this crossroads and they want to engage with the town, the region more generally, the community, to find a way to keep that building in service and good repair. Even if that comes at the cost of their own church services. So, I don't have any special insight into how to make that happen, but I do think we have a great model from the bigger picture. And I think that if everyone at this table can go out and think and, talk to their own network about this possibility down the road, I do think that there's a real possibility there. It's a real exciting opportunity, but it's going to take work and it's going to take time. So glad they're starting that process now, because that gives the community the time to figure out what's doable.
Thank you. Yeah, and I would just add, we had to rush to get the big pitch reopened for financial reasons. And now we're okay and hopefully fully operational by summer, but the amount of energy that it's taken from, it's not just a 12-member board, it's been, I don't know, 25, 30 more people who aren't even mentioned anywhere on the website, doing technical stuff and researching things that we needed. And so I guess I would just say that many hands, make light work, and that's across the community as well as for each organization. If everyone gives a little of their time and a little of their money, that goes a long way. But I think that's really exciting.
Yeah, I'm excited for what could be there. And I'm really glad they started the ball rolling now and not when there is a deadline at sight. So, I don't think this is an urgent situation, but it is a fantastic space. And just to sort of expound on that, yes, that village meeting house that I'm sure everyone's been in at some point for community meetings in the basement, is available, but they are envisioning a world in which the community could use not just that space, but the entire building, including the current sanctuary. So, which, is probably the largest single meeting space in the valley at this point, at least that would potentially be public. And they're considering removing the pews or relocating them elsewhere, so it would be an open space. So it's sort of like the sky's the limit for the use of that space. So if you have any, thoughts on what could be a potential path, I know Mark would be interested. I know that they have a committee to discuss this. So I think it could be really cool.
And I think it's worth mentioning, just the name, the Village Meeting House.
Yeah.
Right, what grew from, and I was part of some of those conversations about 10 years ago, but grew from a drive to ensure that building and what it is and what it represents is of service to the community. Is that building and that space is relevant for the community where it is now. And it was relevant in different ways at different times, but their willingness to be open of what is relevant mean in 2025 and 2030 and 2050 and and into the future. That's really encouraging.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, you know, I've done lots of presentations, some of which you've been involved with, my kids' camps, town camp,
Yeah.
cooking class, and of course, taking my cans, you know.
Right. Yes. So another community development initiative that I want to highlight, and it's like a potential thing, and it's something that's new. 2 Fridays ago, Sam and I attended an event called Common Ground 25. It was a Vermont Community Leader Summit put on by a nonprofit startup called Shock. Focused on utilizing technology to enhance real-life relationships and community engagement. Essentially, an app. So a nonprofit focused on development of an app, and the app is called BEE. That is envisioned to be at the intersection of a map, a calendar, and a social connection application to help users find, filter, and sign up for community activities, things like trailhead cleanups to not weed pulling to sorting donations, and easily allow individuals and communities to host activities where those things are needed and make that connection. So really an app to facilitate real life meetings and gatherings and building community. And so, you know, we're fortunate to have the work that the chamber's done in particular in creating a community calendar. And this is envisioned to be something, so there's this nonprofit tech entity developing this new app. And we went to this event, not really knowing what we were getting into. It was really fascinating because there were a lot of folks doing similar community work across the state, from refugee resettlement in the southern part of the state to working with a variety of different communities in the Burlington area. But really talking about what are the challenges in community work. And one of those is for community members to find the doors and windows of service or engagement or connection, which is, I think, part of what we're talking about, right? Sometimes it's a place, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a place. And we're really, I mean, back to the chamber and the Stewart MRV process of having 20 some odd sites where there's individuals that are cleaning up trailheads and swim holes. But what are the ways that folks who aren't already engaged can get engaged? And this app is designed to address that. And it's called BEE. It is not released yet. So
What's the
at the
organization calling it?
Shock.
SHOCK.
OCK, correct. And so at the end of the event, we learned more about the app. And essentially, they were looking for community members to host. These aren't events; they are called activities, not events, but activities. To host activities and put them on there because they want to launch it this summer, and they want to populate it with community things. And so it was really fascinating. It's a new concept, a new idea. We'll see where it goes, but I could see, Sam and I chatted afterwards, and we could really see that this could work in our community in particular, for which there are lots of organizations and a lot of people who are engaged and that are doing things, and folks who are trying to find ways to engage. And if this removes a barrier, then great. So we've had some initial we had one follow-up conversation last week with them and about the possibility of maybe there's some Mad River Valley pilot, because they're planning on releasing this just in the state of Vermont initially and really piloting in a couple of communities here. So Eric will hopefully be part of a subsequent conversation, because I think he has a lot of insight on this work, as well as maybe there's ways to tie into some of the things like the community calendar or things that are more events based versus these more work initiatives. So anyway, that's just another example of something that in this realm of community development and what appears to be an appetite for more community development opportunities, that's a completely different, that's a platform-based way. So any other questions, feedback, things on this topic? Not to steal your job, Dan.
No, hearing none, let's move on to It's almost 8:30. Usually I like to end meetings at 8:30, but we still got a ways to go. The next item is the MRVPD 40th anniversary discussion.
So this year marks the 40th anniversary of the Articles of Agreement that created the planning district. And there has been kicked around an idea of finding some way to essentially highlight the work of the planning district. Speaking of relevance in our community, highlight the relevance over time and where we are now. And there is no proposal right now. I mean, from a staff perspective, I've wrote down a handful of things like a retrospective, a celebration, a multi-partner meeting, like a tri-town meeting, but with all the partners, as well as, as simple as including information in our newsletters. Again, a little bit of that retrospective and highlight the 40th anniversary. We don't have a proposal. It was more just a discussion topic. If folks have any interest, do you have any ideas? Do you want to be a part of implementing something? We don't have a lot of bandwidth to take on more things from a staff perspective. But I just want to recognize it's the 40th anniversary. And since I've been here, there was the 30th anniversary milestone. I guess the 25th, the 30th, the 35th, and
What'd
40th.
you do for those?
Nothing. And we could easily do nothing. But
We have some sort of event with the bigger picture.
right.
When is the actual anniversary?
Well, March 2025 was actually when the document was signed.
As well.
Cool.
Yeah.
I think it should at least be recognized, if not a huge event planned.
Gathering at the bigger picture, and Boston's is right across the street, they didn't just roll a keg over. Problem solved.
Yeah, as long as it can be later in 2025, I think that's a distinct possibility.
Eric, sorry.
Yep. Yes, Eric. Thank you.
You're on mute.
I really think this is an excellent opportunity, and I really like the idea of doing something at the big picture and doing something simple that you wouldn't, preparing some kind of a presentation of some kind, that we could be there with the staff and give Dan the opportunity for the community to learn about what we do here. We have so few this organization does so much that no one freaking knows about. And I think this is a great opportunity to do that. And it wouldn't take that much. We know the history. It's not like it wouldn't be a hard thing. And I would commit to, just making sure and just have a panel discussion and invite people to come and talk about it and celebrate successes, because there's make no mistake, there's a lot of negativity out there. And, I'm just listening to this talk about the big picture and, the church and all these things, like, I hear a lot of negativity about a lot of this stuff. And I try to, kind of flip it around and to the best of my ability. But I think some people are really not aware of how, you're going out and asking for money right now is really hard. These businesses are really struggling. And they're, so that's what I'm hearing. So I think we need to make sure that we are tooting our horns as best we can and use an opportunity like this to do that.
Well said.
Yeah, I agree with Eric. I think, if we could support the bigger picture by getting people there, who might want to eat a little food and drink a little drink, and be amongst their friends and, recognize what, I think, like Eric, I feel like it may be a 10-minute presentation on the achievements, or 15-minute presentation, maybe 10 on the achievements of the MRVPD, and maybe take some questions. And, if we gather our friends, I think we'll have, anyway, I think it would be we could kill a couple birds with not too many stones there.
Doesn't even have to be a presentation per se.
Just a
Got
big panel.
Green, or everybody just have like.
Right.
video kind of playing with the loop of all the cool
Mhm.
things that it does.
I mean, a video would be, I mean, that would be ideal, but I think that creating a video, at least for me, it would be beyond my skill set. But I mean, yes, ideally it could be a video, or it could be a a slideshow. I think Paul might be suggesting, listing achievements that kind of rotates through the thing. Maybe that's easier. But yeah, why not? Why not? I think people really want to get together and have maybe I'm kidding myself, but I feel like people want to get together and have a reason to celebrate and enjoy each other's company.
And focus on the positives, like you said, and or Eric said, there's a lot of, there's negativity and. You know, and it crops up in disturbing places at our planning commission meeting on Monday night. In reaction to the discussion about the transportation corridor. That you know, the overwhelming majority were for the small, medium and large, right? And somebody on our commission was like, oh, so like the most expensive and least attainable. Well, that's
One way to frame
the, you know, the half empty, that's your way of looking at it, or it's the most aspirational and the most exciting. Yeah, you know, you can choose to spin it any way you want, but somebody can take something as cool as the work that's being done to try to put this corridor together and say, oh, well, you shouldn't, you know, that's gonna be too expensive and it's gonna take too long and it'll just never happen, so why bother?
Well, and maybe some of the context of this community has looked at things and said, there's our north arrow, and we're gonna work on it. And the planning district has been a vehicle for supporting our community and doing that.
Right.
And to me, I mean, my own personality is I again, this isn't about me, but my personality is not to brag about, I was raised not to brag, right? Which that and having an organization where, you know, there's a difference between bragging and highlighting successes. And so, you know, I think that there's an opportunity to highlight the role that the planning district has played in support of the community. That what are the community accomplishments that have happened? And that there is a through line through those accomplishments. And some of that is taking time to look at our history. Sometimes that is having a comfortable conversation. Sometimes it's a convening, which that's the term I would use more than anything is convening. I mean, the convening that we had for the housing summit convening was the first community-wide convening that had happened since COVID.
That was the LaRue one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great.
And it was great. And recognizing that that's a role that we play. Now, granted, I had thoughts and aspirations of that event and what would come out of it way more than what actually came out of it. But the convening itself is an act. And right, gets to that community development side that we were talking
I
about.
mean,
So
how can you, I don't see how you can come away from that meeting and go like, well, that's just ridiculous because it's
too hard.
too hard.
Right. So
That's unfortunate. You gotta find, you gotta push back.
well, and or I would, the other way to look at it is that we need to utilize those muscles more, right? We need to add, right, you exercise to build muscles. And so what are the muscles we're trying to build? And that is listening, understanding, aspiring, and working towards a goal. And I think the more convenings or opportunities we have to be together, framed in a way that's positive and supportive.
I will say the positive is that, at least the person I'm talking about didn't go to the first, public,
The one that had to happen at Yes Tomorrow.
the one at Yes Tomorrow, but just came back with had heard negative reports or heard bad things, you know, and among their crowd that, you know, it was, you know, a horrible idea and it'll never happen. At least this person came to the elementary school, right? So that's progress. So,
Yeah, Yeah, and sometimes, our psychology, it's easy to focus on the negative, like someone very dear to me was like, oh, all these restaurants are closing, ramen place, Sage, and well, look what's like Scrag and Row, Peace Burger, Afterthoughts, like all these new things happening also that, it moves on, but it's easy to focus on the negative. But it's not to dismiss the challenges faced by the business community, as Eric knows, so.
I think it would also be nice to get former members. I mean, this is obvious, but in addition to like current town leadership, former members of the MRVPD anyway, I think a convening would be a great idea.
Mention it and can we
Yeah,
think about it
Yeah.
going forward? Not
Yeah.
for the next 2 or 3 months, but probably.
sounds great. I
Yeah,
like that.
and
I
then
like
we
that
should,
timeline.
at at maybe a subsequent meeting, we can talk about who wants to take on or who is willing to take on some sort of organization, assist the staff in planning for it.
Party action. A party planning committee? Yes, party action.
A party
yes.
planning committee.
You
Do
brought
not invite me to be on the committee or the party will suck, but get some fun people.
Sounds good.
Okay, great. Let's see, it's 8:39. We have a member roundtable. Let's see, can I start with Eric?
Oh, put me on the spot, huh?
Do you want to go late at the end?
No, I
Eric?
don't
You do
mind.
it.
I don't
Okay,
know, get it out of the way.
Okay.
We've got a lot going on with the chamber. As I mentioned, just generally speaking, it's a challenging business environment out there. On so many different fronts, which we all know about. There is a lot of concern for the future and where things are going, and being able to hire people and housing and all of the issues that we always have. And now there's more economic issues. I mean, people are absolutely spending less money. It's not just here, it's everywhere. Bookings are not great for the summer. They're coming in much slower than they had been. We have far fewer weddings than we normally do, which is a big driver in the summer. So there are a lot of challenges out there. And so that's what we're trying to do, is really rally the community and take advantage of as much as we can do, and having the various business sectors helping one another out. Really putting in a lot of work getting the Stewart MRV program up and running. We have, I think it was 90% of our volunteers came back, and we filled every open slot and then some. So, and we've added 2 new sites this year, the Recreation Hub, which is a real big one, and the top of App Gap, which is funny that we never thought of adding it before, but it's the end of the Mad River Greenway, the Mad River Byway, and it was kind of a mess up there. So we have a volunteer up there picking that place up, and it was actually one of the kind of dirtiest places that we had. So things are going really well with that, and we're gearing up for the real first year of the Rec Hub really being in full operation. And we're hoping that within the next few months that the restaurant will get leased, and that will really get things cranked up there. But I'm really happy to report that people are using it, and the parking lot is filling up with people. People are using the toilet facilities and coming into the Welcome Center, and they're using it, and it's awesome to see. And people are going there and walking their dogs, and and bikers and out of town people, and it's good. So it's working as intended, and I think it's really gonna gather momentum as things move along. And then I'm doing all the other chamber stuff that we do. And I'll give you a fun anecdote. Is the last person, I got the most Vermont phone message the other day that said, I'm coming to Waitsfield on July 21st, the weekend. Wanted to know if there are any drum circles. It's like, that's awesome.
Yeah, it should be on the app, you know?
Exactly, right.
And all I was thinking, I'm like, well, I know he's not a Trumpy guy.
Thank you, Eric. We'll keep our our ears open for any drum circles and
Yes.
make sure that gets back to you.
Yeah, thank you.
Jim?
I don't have a lot to update, from last time. We're well into putting the surface lift at Mount Ellen. It's all graded out and, ready to be installed. We've got 30 weddings. We just booked our 30th wedding for the summer, so it's, not as busy as years past, but.
What's
it's-
typical?
Typical is probably about, I think we're missing 4 weekends. So 35, 36.
You're doing better than most.
Yeah, they're not as big, but. It'll be good. We are struggling a little bit with the group business, versus last summer. That might have to do with, we've had changeover in people and long lead times for. And short lead times for group business, but, we're filling in. We're having the Green Mountain, Hooker Association at the mountain that Eric would enjoy. It's a, quilting and rug display if anyone's around this weekend.
There's like 500 people there.
Yeah, it's, well,
500 hookers?
500 hookers.
Yeah.
A lot of people.
No rugby players.
I was, my mind went to rugby players too.
And you'll be glad to know about 15 of them stopped into the Welcome Center,
Yep. No, we have,
trying to find Sugarbush.
yep.
It's hard.
That's nice.
Other than that, we're looking forward to the summer and, we'll be having, events at Mount Ellen, Thursday nights. We're going to have our pig jig, not Memorial Day weekend, but the weekend after, which was a big successful event last year. So that's about it. Now.
Thanks, Jim. I'm out of curiosity. I guess this is for both Eric and Jim. Are we, are we seeing like our Canadian neighbors and friends just deciding I'm assuming that's a big impact. They're deciding they're not going to cross the border.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely a thing. And it's interesting because Peter McLaren, who owns the West Hill House over in Warren, is the chair of the board of it's like National Innkeepers Association. And so he's very plugged into these sorts of things. And he's lived in Canada for a long time before he moved here. And they're really noticing that trend. And the Vermont tourism industry is working hard to, differentiate Vermont from the rest of the United States because of the close ties that we've had and the political leanings of the state. But anecdotally, I can tell you that there was a group that usually stays at the Warren House, the Warren Lodge at the bottom of the access road, motorcycle group, usually about 25 to 30 people that come every year for a long time. And they are not coming this year. So.
Yeah, I went to Canada a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and they're not happy.
I mean, just on our side, I mean, we will mostly see it in the winter. I've heard that Jay Peak is extremely nervous because that's a majority of their business. A lot of that has to do with reduced hours at the border, at their border crossing. And I do know there are a lot of available slips up at the Burlington Harbor, with Canadians not coming down this summer. So.
That's what I was gonna mention. I heard that Burlington Harbor Marine is suffering.
Brutal. And so unnecessary.
Thought he just sold it, and he's happy.
Let's see, looking around the room, is the next person, did I miss Dave?
I can go, just real quick. Yeah, so the roundup is in 6 days. May 21st it starts. Twisted Halo will be providing the liquids and some food, and also Scrag and Row will be serving some food as well. And the other big thing going on is doing a lot of tree work, taking down problematic trees. And we've, as you'll notice, the preparation for paving East Warren Road and Slow Road is happening. So that'll be rolling out over the next couple weeks. And then I just wanted to quickly mention before I forgot, other community spaces that are successful recent things. The Warren Dog Park, which is so awesome. Couples Field, I was just down there right before this, and it's just a absolute paradise of, you know, there must have been 300 people there watching their kids and hanging out, having snack shack. Warren Co-ed Softball League, which I'm part of. Any night you go there, you'll find 40-45 people gathering and having a great time. Afterthoughts is like doing line dancing. They're doing ping pong tournaments. They're doing dance parties. And that has been
Bingo.
a space,
They're doing bingo.
a space that has really been needed in the community, and looking forward to the new restaurant at the Rec
My
Hub.
wife wants to be a good dancer. So.
Thank you, Dave. Let's see, next in line, looks like we're going to Jonathan.
Sure. I actually don't have a lot to share. We sort of went over the big news for the planning commission in Waitsfield, which is our imminent meeting with A&R to talk about wetlands and our plans for the master planning grant process. So we're very hopeful for that, for, you know, good news coming out of that. I mean, we're very carefully presenting that as really an initial discussion to discuss opportunities, and we're not asking for any specific action coming out of that, but the ultimate hope is that we can work with them to significantly streamline the wetlands permitting process for future development in Irisville by making certain commitments at the town level to preservation and enhancement efforts in wetlands. And what exactly those will look like, we don't know yet, but you know, the overall goal, I think, for all parties is to see high functioning wetlands enhanced, you know, serve their natural function both for local ecology and also for flood prevention and resilience, but also see development that the community really needs in Irisville along Slow Road and that whole area. And we're hoping that we can, as we were sort of told at the outset of this whole process, a lot of the difficulty that business owners and landowners in that area have faced has been, you know, getting wetlands permits, the state feeling like there's not a coordinated approach, and so they don't want to engage in one-off permitting application review approvals when there's such an interconnected nature of those wetlands. And, you know, if they approve one project here, what is that going to do for the rest of the wetlands ecosystem in Irisville? And so our goal coming out of that meeting will be to keep that conversation going, to get a little bit more structure around what we can do as a town to help that process along, what types of inclusions and studies in our master plan can help the landowners there to get the permitting they need to do the work that they need so that our community can grow. So fingers crossed that we have a really productive conversation on that front. Outside of that, yeah, our work has been so focused on getting through this master plan and supporting the town and wastewater. We don't have a whole lot else to speak to, but I'm looking forward to coming out of this, getting our master plan phase 1 done, and then having more projects to talk about in the near term.
Thank you.
There we are.
Thanks, Jonathan. PQ?
We had a planning commission meeting on Monday. And there was a bloodless coup, and I'm no longer the chairman of the planning commission. Actually, that coup took place in March. Langford Davidson is now the chairman of the commission. He's gonna do a great job, super motivated. And so we spent some time on Monday just putting together our final edits and revisions to the LU land use regulations that we'll send out to the select board. And now we begin the process of updating the town plan. Yeah, things are rolling along. No big issues to report.
Thank you. Have I hit everyone other than myself? Okay. So I guess I'll do quickly from Warren. I'll take the select board parts that I know. you know, as you read probably in last week's Valley Reporter, the town, I mean, getting the town garage out of the village center would be such a coup. And we're heading towards a bond vote in November 4th. Weeman Lamphere has been hired as architects and Rearch as the construction manager. We just started, you know, I've been involved only because they need help in communication strategy. Not that I'm an expert in that, but, you know, we've been working on FAQs and trying to explain why it's would be such a win. So that's also on the select board's to do the short-term rental ordinance, which the Planning Commission presented to them in the fall, is still under legal review. Hopefully the select board will hear back from VLCT, which they hired to do the legal work. In the meantime, of course, the select board moved forward with Granicus and forwarded the grant list to them. So Granicus has been doing sort of stuff in the background, but you know, we really need to get an ordinance in place to start collecting revenue and to complete sort of the registration process. So that timing delay between hiring Granicus and passing an ordinance, I think, is unfortunate because, you know, one of the selling points is, of course, revenue offsets the cost of Granicus. So that's going on. I mentioned previously, we passed the much delayed land use development regulations back to the select board. So that's also on their to-do list. They have a massive amount of work to do and I know we're short-staffed and overwhelmed. And it really makes me think that the demands we put on our select boards on their small towns is really quite extraordinary. I'll stop my editorializing. At the PC, yeah, we're supporting the town garage project. Joshua gave us, both the select board and the PC, excellent advice on sort of communication strategies, and Sam. So, you know, we've implemented sort of a citizen advocate program to help get the word out about why the garage is building a new garage really in a different location is such a great idea. What else? As I mentioned, the Planning Commission, some of the younger members want to do this roundup-like event. And we're going to start our town plan, you know, our town plan revision.
And I mean, it's a little bit outside, but there's a new gazebo.
Right. I haven't seen it completed yet, but yes. Speaking of overworked select board members, Devin Klein Corrigan, the chair of our select board, was out there with her husband Taylor building a gazebo. When I left our planning commission at 9 p.m. at night, I saw them on Monday. I saw them up there in the rafters. So you don't get a clearer picture of overwork than that.
Go ahead. Folks may not know, but the gazebo project and the Madrid Valley Dog Park project were both projects that utilized support from the planning district, but connecting with a resource through the Agency of Commerce and Community Development in a fundraising platform called Patronicity, where they essentially were a platform for fundraising to support community-led initiatives. And so Amy Tomaso, previous community planner, really grabbed the dog park project, and there had been talks about dog parks for a while in the valley, many times. And they sort of hit the ground running, and that has been, I mean, an exceedingly great success. And the gazebo project was also tied in and utilized that same platform, and it had other champions for that. But you know,
lots of slides at the bigger picture of
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
Exactly. It's a little of the Forrest Gump
Puppies
thing. Like if you look in the
stretch,
background, you'll see the person.
MRVPE and puppies
Yes.
playing. I mean, come on.
I had forgotten
Wonderful.
the MRVPD's role in the gazebo completely.
So did I,
think-
until we started talking about it. That's why we
Okay.
need to tell the story.
Well, let's get those. I agree with PQ. Those need to be, pictures of them need to be in our slide deck
Yeah.
as recent wins, because those are big.
That's great.
It is 8:57, folks. We have, our upcoming meeting is June 19th, 2025. Do let us know if you can't make it. because we want to make sure we have a quorum. Otherwise, I would entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Eric. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Jonathan. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
No abstentions, no objections heard. Therefore, the meeting is adjourned at 8:58 PM. Thank you, folks, for your time and your